The Krathar loomed over galactic politics like ancient titans, evolved on the merciless world of Morskon, a planet with crushing gravity, caustic atmosphere, and apex predators that would give nightmares to the bravest souls. They had developed into living fortresses. Their obsidian exoskeletons, naturally acidic circulatory fluid, and phenomenal strength made them the undisputed champions of survival in a universe of gentle garden worlds. Commander Vex Thol stood on the bridge of the Dominance, watching stars streak past the view screen. His mandibles clicked in mild annoyance as he reviewed the diplomatic briefing. Another trade negotiation where his presence alone would secure favorable terms. Another meeting where softer species would flinch at his shadow. The novelty had worn thin centuries ago. The unidentified vessel detected, Commander reported his sensor officer. Small craft, unknown configuration, approaching Commonwealth space at impossible velocities for its mass. Vex Thal's compound eyes shifted to the tactical display. The vessel was indeed tiny, barely larger than a Krathar scout ship, yet moving with the speed of a cruiser. More intriguing still, it showed energy signatures unlike anything in Commonwealth records. Intercept course. Standard first contact protocols, he ordered, anticipation replacing boredom. Perhaps this day would prove interesting after all. Let's welcome these newcomers to the reality of a universe where the Krathar stand supreme. The newcomers, however, had other ideas. As the Dominance altered course, Vex Thal studied the approaching vessel more carefully. Its design defied Krathar aesthetics of intimidation and Commonwealth standards of efficiency. Instead, it displayed an elegant asymmetry, form following function in ways he couldn't immediately categorize. The hull appeared to be composed of materials both familiar and utterly foreign, with radiation signatures suggesting sophisticated shielding beyond current Commonwealth technology. Their vessel is maintaining course, Subcommander Krellvax reported, her chitinous fingers dancing across the command console. They're neither accelerating nor attempting evasive maneuvers. Curious, Vex Thal mused. Most species encountering a Krathar warship for the first time responded with either immediate surrender or panicked retreat. This calm approach suggested either supreme confidence or profound ignorance. Either possibility intrigued him. Establish communication channels across all standard frequencies, he ordered, and prepare boarding teams. I want to inspect this vessel personally. The communications officer, a younger Krathar named Rezkara, whose carapace still bore the bright blue markings of recent maturation, turned from her station. Commander, they're broadcasting already. Not on any Commonwealth frequency, but they've somehow matched our ship's quantum resonance pattern. The bridge fell silent. Quantum resonance patterns were unique to each vessel, essentially its subatomic signature. For a foreign ship to identify and synchronize with that pattern so quickly suggested technological capabilities well beyond expected parameters. On screen, Vex Thal ordered, straightening to his full 9-foot height as the view screen shimmered. The image that appeared stunned the bridge crew into silence. The being before them was unlike any recognized Commonwealth species. It stood upright on two limbs like the avian pylori, but lacked feathers or scales. Its skin appeared soft and vulnerable, with no visible natural armor. Its eyes, only two of them, were forward-facing like a predator species, yet it possessed no visible claws, fangs, or defensive structures. It wore some kind of artificial covering that presumably served as protective clothing, though it seemed inadequate for any serious environmental hazards. Most disconcerting of all, the being's face contorted into what Vex Thal's cultural database identified as a smile, a gesture of amicability among certain Commonwealth species, but utterly foreign to Krathar communication. Greetings to the vessel Dominance and Commander Vex Thal, the being said in perfect galactic standard, its pronunciation flawless despite its alien mouth structure. I am Captain Eliana Rivera of the Earth vessel Pathfinder. We come in peace and request permission to discuss formal diplomatic relations between our worlds. Vex Thal's mandibles clicked rapidly, A Krathar expression of profound surprise. Not only had this alien correctly identified his ship and rank, but it had addressed him by name. The intelligence implications were significant. "You have entered Commonwealth space uninvited," he responded, deploying the standard intimidation protocols that had served the Krathar for generations. "Your vessel will power down immediately and prepare for boarding and inspection." The human's expression remained unchanged, that disconcerting smile still in place. "With respect, Commander, we've studied Commonwealth protocols extensively. As a previously unknown species seeking first contact, we're entitled to a diplomatic meeting before any inspection procedures. Section 47, Paragraph 3 of the Commonwealth Charter of Civilized Engagement. We're simply requesting adherence to the established regulations." A low hiss escaped Vex Thal's breathing spiracles, the Krathar equivalent of a stunned inhalation. This soft, unarmored creature was quoting Commonwealth law to him, with perfect accuracy no less. These humans had clearly been observing the Commonwealth for some time, gathering intelligence and preparing for this moment. What else did they know? And more importantly, what else were they hiding behind that disarmingly vulnerable exterior? Dr. Elena Rees had prepared her entire life for this moment. Earth's first official diplomatic mission beyond the solar system represented humanity's greatest achievement, the culmination of 15 years of secret research since discovering the Commonwealth's communication network. The Pathfinder wasn't humanity's most impressive vessel, but it carried Earth's brightest minds and most advanced technology. A perfect blend of human innovation and reverse-engineered concepts gleaned from intercepted transmissions. When the massive Krathar warship materialized before them, bristling with weapon systems and intimidating design elements, Elena maintained perfect composure. The crew had studied all known Commonwealth species extensively. They recognized evolutionary cousins when they saw them. "This is Commander Vex Thal of the Galactic Commonwealth Diplomatic Fleet," came the transmission, the translator rendering the clicking, hissing language into English. "Your vessel has entered protected space. Power down and prepare for inspection." Elena straightened her uniform and faced the camera. "This is Dr. Elena Reyes of Earth's First Contact Mission. We respectfully acknowledge your authority in this region, but request a diplomatic meeting rather than an inspection." Then, to the shock of the Krathar crew, she switched to their native language, her vocal implants allowing her to produce sounds no human throat could naturally create. "We come seeking knowledge and friendship, not subjugation." The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. "You speak our language," Vex Thal finally responded. "Impossible. Our vocal patterns cannot be reproduced by soft tissue species." Elena smiled. "Commander, if I may be so bold, impossibility is humanity's favorite starting point." Intrigued beyond his careful diplomatic training, Vex Thal agreed to a face-to-face meeting aboard the human vessel. His security team advised against it. The Krathar had dominated space for centuries precisely because they never placed themselves at a disadvantage. But as he stepped aboard the Pathfinder, Vex Thal couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The airlock cycled with a hiss, revealing the interior of the human vessel. Vex Thal ducked his massive frame through the doorway, followed by two security officers whose clawed hands remained close to their sidearms. The air inside carried unfamiliar scents, organic compounds that triggered warning signals in his chemoreceptors. "Our atmosphere is adjusted to approximate Earth standard conditions," Dr. Reyes explained, noting his hesitation. "Our data suggested it would be within Krathar tolerance ranges, but we can modify it if you experience any discomfort." Vex Thal's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of surprise his species rarely displayed to outsiders. These humans had researched Krathar physiology to a degree that should have been impossible for an unknown species. "The atmosphere is acceptable," he replied, studying the human before him with new interest. In person, she appeared even more fragile than on the view screen. Her skin lacked any protective covering beyond the thin fabric of her uniform. Her limbs were slender, showing no obvious defensive capabilities. Yet she stood before three apex predators without displaying any stress hormones or fear responses that his sensory organs could detect. "Welcome aboard the Pathfinder, Commander," she said, extending one of her upper limbs toward him. "On Earth, we often greet new allies with a handshake, a gesture signifying peaceful intentions." His security officer, Sub-Commander Zexkara, shifted forward protectively. "Commander, I advise against physical contact with an unknown species." Vexthal considered the warning, then deliberately extended his own massive, armored appendage. "The Commonwealth achieved greatness through calculated risks, Sub-Commander." Their hands met, his dwarfing hers, chitinous plates against soft skin. What happened next defied all Krathar biological understanding. The human's grip was firm, controlled, and exhibited strength disproportionate to her frame. Not Krathar strength, certainly, but far beyond what her physiology suggested possible. "Your species has studied us extensively," Vexthal observed as they began walking through the corridor. "Yet the Commonwealth has no record of human civilization." Elena nodded. "We discovered your communication network approximately 15 years ago, when one of our deep space probes detected quantum signal patterns. Since then, we've been listening, learning, and preparing for this meeting." 15 years is remarkably brief for developing the technology you've demonstrated, Vexthal noted. "Your vessel's propulsion system alone would require decades of research." A slight smile crossed Elena's face. "Necessity drives innovation, Commander. And humans have always excelled at adapting existing knowledge to new purposes." They entered what appeared to be a conference room, where several other humans waited. Vexthal noted with interest the diversity in their coloration and physical structures, variations within the species that suggested environmental adaptations to different planetary conditions. "Allow me to introduce our delegation," Elena said. "Captain Miguel Rodriguez, our mission commander. Dr. Hiroshi Takahashi, chief xenobiologist. Engineer Sarah Chen, propulsion systems. And Dr. Quamo Sei, our linguistic specialist who helped me learn your language." Vexthal studied each human carefully, his compound eyes missing nothing. Despite their outward differences, they shared a common quality he couldn't immediately identify, a certain intensity of focus and alertness that reminded him of Krathar warriors before battle. "I begin to suspect," he said slowly, "that your species has more in common with mine than appearances would suggest. Tell me, Dr. Reyes, what kind of world produces creatures like you?" The Commonwealth classified all intelligent species along an evolutionary spectrum. At one end were the delicate arborans, evolved in perfect atmospheric conditions with minimal environmental stress. At the opposite extreme stood the Krathar, shaped by the brutal conditions of their homeworld. Humans defied placement anywhere on this spectrum. "These medical scans must be flawed," insisted Zexmara, the Krathar science officer, her claws tapping impatiently on her data tablet. "No single species could evolve with this combination of adaptations." Dr. Takahashi, the Pathfinder's chief medical officer, displayed remarkable patience as he explained. "Earth features every environmental extreme short of our sun going supernova. We evolved as persistence hunters who can metabolize compounds toxic to most life forms. Our digestive system hosts trillions of microorganisms. Our skeletal structure regenerates from breaks, and our neurological system requires periodic unconsciousness during which you experience vivid hallucinations." Zexmara interrupted, mandibles twitching with disbelief. "And you voluntarily consume neurotoxins for pleasure." "We call it coffee," Captain Rodriguez interjected with a smile. "Would you care to try some?" The true revelation came during a tour of the engineering section. When Vexthal's armored elbow accidentally grazed Engineer Chen's arm, drawing blood, the human response transformed the Krathar's understanding completely. Chen simply applied a medical sealant, injected herself with antibiotics, and continued the tour as if nothing significant had occurred. You should be immobilized, Vexthal stated flatly. My exoskeleton secretes a paralyzing agent on contact with open wounds. Chen shrugged. Similar compounds exist in certain earth fungi. Some humans consume them regularly for recreational purposes. Vexthal exchanged glances with his science officer. For the first time in recorded Krathar history, they experienced an unfamiliar sensation. They were not the most dangerous beings in the room. The examination continued in the Pathfinder's laboratory module, where Dr. Takahashi had prepared a comprehensive presentation on human biology. Holographic displays showed detailed anatomical structures that further confounded the Krathar scientists. Your immune system, Zexmara noted with growing fascination, it appears to adapt to threats. Precisely, Takahashi confirmed. Rather than relying solely on inherited defenses, our immune system creates customized responses to each pathogen it encounters. Once exposed to a disease, we typically develop lifelong immunity. Impossible, one of the junior Krathar scientists chittered. Such a system would require constant adjustment at the cellular level. Exactly right, Takahashi said, his enthusiasm evident. Our bodies maintain this dynamic equilibrium continuously. We call it homeostasis. Commander Vexthal studied the displays with increasing concern. Such adaptability suggests your species evolved in an environment of extreme biological diversity and threat. Dr. Rees nodded. Earth contains millions of species, many of which compete directly with humans. Our evolution was shaped by constant adaptation to changing threats, from microscopic viruses to megafauna predators. And yet, Vexthal observed, your physical structure lacks obvious defensive capabilities. No natural armor, minimal muscle mass compared to Krathar standards, no venom delivery systems, or significant claws. We took a different evolutionary path, explained Dr. Osei, the linguistics specialist. Rather than physical adaptations, we developed complex problem-solving capabilities. We create external tools and technologies to compensate for our biological limitations. To demonstrate, Dr. Reyes activated another display showing human history, primitive ancestors using simple stone tools, developing controlled fire, creating increasingly sophisticated weapons and shelters, and eventually building modern civilization. Your species weaponized intelligence itself, Zexmara realized, her mandibles clicking rapidly. We prefer to think of it as solving problems, Reyes corrected gently. Though our history certainly includes warfare and conflict. The demonstration continued with examples of human medical technology, cybernetic limbs that exceeded biological strength, artificial organs grown from the recipient's own cells, neural interfaces that expanded sensory capabilities beyond natural limits. You've begun directing your own evolution, Vexthal stated, the implications dawning on him. No longer constrained by natural selection. We're still exploring the ethical boundaries, Takahashi admitted. But yes, increasingly we can modify our biology to overcome limitations. The most startling revelation came when Takahashi displayed human reproductive and developmental data. Our offspring are born neurologically incomplete, essentially helpless for years, while their brains develop in response to environmental stimuli. This neuroplasticity allows humans to adapt to almost any environment within a single generation. Such vulnerability should be an evolutionary dead end, Zexmara protested. Krathar young emerge fully developed, ready to survive independently. Different strategies for different worlds, Reyes explained. Our extended childhood allows for cultural transmission of knowledge and incredible behavioral adaptability. What we sacrifice in immediate survival capability, we gain in long-term adaptive potential. As the presentation concluded, Vexthal stood silently contemplating the implications. The Commonwealth had encountered over 300 sapient species, each fitting somewhere on the known spectrum of evolutionary strategies. Humans represented something entirely new, a species that had turned adaptability itself into their primary survival trait. I believe, he said finally, that the Commonwealth Council will need to be informed immediately. Your species represents unprecedented possibilities. Dr. Reyes nodded. We hoped you'd see it that way, Commander. Earth is ready to join the galactic community as partners, not subjects. Vex Stahl's compound eyes fixed on hers. First, I must understand one thing. What is it like to live on a world that produces beings such as yourselves? The Commonwealth Council demanded verification of human claims. A delegation including representatives from 13 species journeyed to Earth, expecting to find exaggerated reports. What they discovered exceeded their wildest concerns. Earth qualified as a death world by any reasonable standard, yet one supporting millions of species and billions of intelligent inhabitants. The alien delegation required extensive protective equipment in most regions, still suffering adverse reactions to Earth's gravity, atmospheric composition, temperature variations, and microscopic life. How do your young survive infancy? Asked Talori, a representative of the feathered aviatae, watching human children deliberately exposing themselves to dirt and climbing dangerous structures in a park. We call it building immunity and learning resilience, their guide explained. Children need environmental challenges to develop properly. The delegation observed humans swimming in oceans containing deadly predators, scaling oxygen-deprived mountains for recreation, and thriving in deserts that would kill a Krathar within hours. Their cities existed in regions regularly devastated by earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions, and extreme weather. Their food contained compounds toxic to every Commonwealth species. Their entertainment included deliberately subjecting themselves to simulated danger. Their medical technology focused not just on curing disease, but enhancing natural capabilities. Most disturbing was human history. Unlike the Krathar, who had united under environmental pressure, humans had spent millennia fighting each other with increasingly sophisticated weapons. Their technological development had been driven not just by survival needs, but by warfare against their own kind. They aren't merely survivors of a hostile world, Vexthal reported to the Council. They are its apex predators, adapted not just to endure hardship, but to thrive in it. And now they're looking toward the stars. The delegation returned with a troubling conclusion. Humans weren't just Deathworlders. They were something unprecedented in galactic history. The diplomatic spacecraft touched down at the specially constructed landing zone outside Geneva, Switzerland. Despite human assurances about environmental safety measures, every member of the alien delegation emerged wearing protective suits designed to shield them from Earth's hostile ecosystem. Only the Krathar wore minimal protection, their natural defenses more adapted to extreme conditions than other Commonwealth species. Commander Vexthal stepped onto Earth soil, his sensory organs immediately overwhelmed by input. The gravity pulled at his frame, not unbearable, but noticeably stronger than Commonwealth standard. The air, even filtered through his breathing apparatus, carried thousands of unfamiliar compounds, and the ambient radiation levels from the planet's sun would have been considered hazardous on most civilized worlds. Welcome to Earth, Dr. Reyes greeted them, standing comfortably in the morning sunlight wearing nothing more protective than light clothing. Behind her, a crowd of human officials waited to greet the delegation, similarly unprotected from their world's natural hostility. Your atmospheric composition, noted Zexmara, checking readings on her equipment, contains oxygen levels that would be considered corrosive on most Commonwealth worlds. Yet necessary for our metabolism, explained Dr. Takahashi, who had joined them. Our cells utilize oxygen's reactive properties to generate energy. The first scheduled visit was to a nature preserve, where the delegation could observe Earth's ecosystem in a relatively controlled setting. As their transport vehicle moved through the landscape, the aliens watched in stunned silence as the terrain changed rapidly from forests to grasslands to wetlands, more biome variation in a few kilometers than some Commonwealth planets contained on their entire surface. The biodiversity readings are impossible, murmured Lethnar, the Solari scientist whose crystalline form sparkled in Earth's intense sunlight. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. I assure you they're accurate, Dr. O.C. replied. Earth contains approximately 8 million distinct species, and those are just the ones we've cataloged. Estimates suggest millions more remain undiscovered. The most disturbing demonstration came when their human guides took them to witness what they called extreme sports, activities humans performed voluntarily for recreation. The delegation watched humans leaping from aircraft with minimal safety equipment, deliberately riding turbulent water currents in fragile vessels, and climbing sheer rock faces with nothing but their natural limbs and rudimentary tools. This behavior defies evolutionary logic, whispered Talori to Vexthal as they watched a human deliberately plunge from a cliff attached only to an elastic cord. What survival advantage comes from such reckless risk-taking? Vexthal had been pondering the same question. Perhaps on a world where danger is omnipresent, familiarity with it becomes an advantage, he suggested. They appear to be inoculating themselves against fear. The final revelation came during a visit to what humans called a hospital, a medical facility where their injured and ill were treated. The delegation observed surgical procedures that would have been fatal to most Commonwealth species, humans recovering from injuries that should have been terminal, and treatments involving the deliberate introduction of modified pathogens to combat disease. Your medical technology is simultaneously primitive and advanced, Zexmora noted to the human physician guiding them. You physically cut into bodies for surgery, yet you can regrow entire organs from cellular samples. The doctor nodded. We found that sometimes the oldest techniques remain effective. Humans have been performing surgery for thousands of years. Our bodies evolved alongside our medical practices. As the tour concluded, the Commonwealth delegation gathered to prepare their report. The evidence was undeniable. Earth was a death world by any scientific definition, hostile, unpredictable, and teeming with dangers. Yet humans had not merely survived there. They had transformed its challenges into advantages and its hostility into opportunity. Vexthal gazed out at the Earth's sunset, its radiation-filled light casting long shadows, and realized a profound truth. The Krathar had survived Morse-Con by becoming stronger than their world. Humans had survived Earth by becoming as adaptable as theirs. And he wasn't certain which approach was more formidable. 6 months after Earth joined the Commonwealth, disaster struck without warning. The Extragol, a hive mind species from beyond charted space, launched a massive invasion along the Commonwealth's outer territories. Their biological technology and overwhelming numbers devastated defense fleets. Even Krathar battlecruisers fell before their onslaught. The Extragol deployed neural toxins, specifically targeting individualized consciousness, ineffective against their own collective mind, but devastating to Commonwealth species. The Krathar, despite their physical resilience, proved particularly vulnerable to these psychic attacks. With Commonwealth defenses crumbling, the Council turned to humanity, whose unusual neurochemistry showed remarkable resistance to Extragol weapons. Admiral Helena Chen deployed Earth's newly commissioned defense fleet to the front lines. But it wasn't their military technology that proved decisive. It was breakfast. Human biochemists discovered that common Earth compounds, caffeine, capsaicin, theobromine, and certain alkaloids, disrupted the Extragol hive mind's synchronization frequencies. Weapons loaded with these ordinary human dietary supplements shattered the enemy's neural network. Vexthal watched from his medical chamber as human Marines, wearing only minimal protective gear, boarded and captured Extragol vessels. Where Krathar warriors collapsed from psychic feedback, humans simply developed headaches and continued fighting. Your species consumes consciousness-altering substances as part of your daily routine, Vexthal remarked to Elena as they planned the counter-offensive. You've been inadvertently training for this conflict throughout your entire evolutionary history. Elena smiled grimly as she studied the battle projections. We never claimed to be the strongest species in the galaxy, Commander. Just the most adaptable. The orbital defense station shuddered as another wave of X-Ergal bioships impacted its shields. Klaxons wailed throughout the command center, warning of structural integrity failures in the outer ring. Commander Vex Thal gripped the tactical console, his exoskeleton's secondary support structures engaging to keep him upright against the station's violent movements. "Status report," he demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Shields at 23%, reported the Pellery tactical officer, her feathered crest flattened in distress. 3 more Commonwealth cruisers lost in Sector 7. The Extra-Gul main fleet will reach Central Territories within 17 hours. Vex Dahl's compound eyes scanned the holographic battle display. The situation was unprecedented in Commonwealth history. Not since the ancient Scourge Wars had their civilization faced such a dire threat. Most disturbing were the reports from the front lines. Krathar warriors, the backbone of Commonwealth defense forces, were falling to the X-Ergul neural weapons despite their legendary resilience. "Commander," called Dr. Reyes from the Human Communications Station. "Admiral Chen reports the Earth fleet is in position. Operation Bitter Brew is ready to commence on your authorization." Vexthal hesitated. The human plan seemed absurd, borderline insulting, when first proposed. Using modified versions of recreational stimulants as weapons against an advanced hive consciousness. Yet their preliminary tests showed promising results, and conventional tactics had failed spectacularly. "Authorize immediately," he ordered, "and prepare my show. I want to observe the engagement personally." Within the hour, Vexthal's command shuttle rendezvoused with the human flagship Resilience. Admiral Chen greeted him on the bridge, where human officers worked with focused intensity despite the looming Extra-Gul fleet visible through the main viewport. "Your crew seems remarkably calm," Vexthal observed. "Standard combat stimulants," Chen explained. "Most of us have been consuming modified caffeine compounds since before the battle. Helps maintain focus while providing some neural resistance to the X-Ergul influence." The Admiral gestured to a tactical display showing specialized missiles being loaded into launch tubes across the human fleet. Each delivery system contains concentrated compounds derived from earth plants, caffeine from coffee beans, capsaicin from chili peppers, theobromine from cacao. Our scientists discovered these compounds create disruptive interference patterns in the X-Ergul hive frequency. "You're attempting to induce a collective headache in a hive mind," Vexthal stated, still skeptical. Chen smiled tightly. "On Earth, Commander, we learned long ago that sometimes the simplest solutions work best. The most elegant weapon is one your enemy never designed a defense against." The battle unfolded with stunning efficiency. Human ships deployed their specialized weapons directly into the heart of the X-Ergul fleet. Within minutes, the formerly coordinated enemy formations began to fragment. Individual bioships drifted aimlessly, their synchronized attack patterns dissolving into chaos. Human boarding parties, protected by nothing more than standard combat armor and internal biochemical resistance, secured vessel after vessel, while Exergal drones collapsed in neurological distress. From his observation position, Vexthal watched as the seemingly unstoppable invasion crumbled before a weaponized version of human breakfast beverages. "Remarkable," he murmured. "We've spent centuries evolving to survive the harshest environments in known space. Yet you humans evolved to thrive on substances that would incapacitate most species. Different evolutionary pressures, different solutions," Dr. Reyes replied beside him. "Your species became stronger. Ours became stranger. Victory against the X-Ergul elevated humanity's standing within the Commonwealth. Human innovation, adaptability, and resistance to environmental threats made them invaluable allies and potential competitors to the Krathar's long-standing influence. When humans proposed an ambitious terraforming initiative to rehabilitate worlds devastated during the X-Ergul conflict, the Commonwealth Council split into factions. The Krothar, traditionally advocates for expansion, found themselves arguing for restraint. "You fundamentally misunderstand what you're proposing," Vexthal addressed the council. "I've witnessed how humans transform environments on their own world. They don't adapt to planets. They remake planets to suit themselves." The debate intensified when human engineers demonstrated their methods by transforming an uninhabitable moon into a viable colony within months rather than the centuries typical of Commonwealth terraforming. Their techniques, combining bioengineering with nanotechnology, operated at a pace that alarmed conservative council members. "The Krothar conquered through superior strength," noted the Arboran delegate. "Humans conquer through transformation. Which approach presents the greater long-term implications for our galactic community?" The situation came to a head when a faction of Krothar traditionalists, threatened by humanity's growing influence, sabotaged a human terraforming platform. The resulting cascade reaction threatened to render an entire system uninhabitable. Against all protocols, a human emergency team voluntarily entered radiation levels lethal to any Commonwealth species. Using experimental medical procedures, they endured long enough to stabilize the reaction. 3 of the 5 humans lost their lives, but succeeded where even Krothar physiology would have failed. In their sacrifice, the humans demonstrated their ultimate Deathworlder quality: willingness to give their lives not just for their own kind, but for a greater community that included aliens who feared them. The Council's perspective shifted dramatically. What made humans dangerous wasn't their resilience or adaptability. It was their capacity for self-sacrifice in service of something beyond themselves. The emergency containment pod descended toward the destabilized terraforming platform, cutting through clouds of radiation that swirled in beautiful, lethal patterns around the facility's damaged core. Inside the pod, 5 human specialists checked their experimental radiation shielding suits one final time. "Readings confirm what we suspected," Dr. Markov stated, examining data on his wrist display. "The sabotage triggered a cascading reaction in the atmospheric processors. If not contained within 4 hours, the entire Proxima colony will be uninhabitable for centuries." Captain Torres nodded grimly. "The radiation levels. Beyond survivable parameters for any known species," Markov replied. "Even with our shielding, projected exposure will exceed lethal dose within 40 minutes. "That's cutting it close," Engineer Patel observed. "The stabilization sequence requires at least 35 minutes to complete." "Then we'd better work quickly," Torres replied with a calmness that impressed Vexthal, who was monitoring the mission from the Commonwealth rescue vessel in orbit. The Krothar commander had argued vehemently against this mission. No responsible commander would send personnel into conditions guaranteed to be fatal. Yet the human leadership had not ordered these 5 specialists to undertake the mission. They had volunteered, knowing full well what awaited them. Vexthal watched through remote feeds as the humans entered the facility, moving with practiced efficiency despite the bulky protection suits. Their vital signs displayed on a secondary monitor, already showing elevated stress as radiation penetrated their shielding. "Commander, you should see this," called Sub-Commander Zexkera, gesturing to a communications display. The screen showed the Planetary Council in emergency session, watching the same feed that Vexthal observed. "If these humans succeed," noted the Pelori counselor, her feathers trembling with emotion, "they will have saved not just the Proxima colony, but 3 neighboring systems from radiation contamination, at the cost of their own lives. Such sacrifice defies rational analysis," stated the Solari representative, its crystalline form pulsing with confusion. As the debate continued, Vexthal returned his attention to the mission feed. The human team had reached the core and begun the stabilization sequence. Their vital signs were deteriorating rapidly as radiation poisoning took its toll. 2 team members had already collapsed, yet the others continued working, redistributing tasks to compensate. What manner of evolution produced beings willing to die for others not of their kind? What survival advantage could possibly emerge from such behavior? The answer came to him as the stabilization sequence completed successfully, even as the last human team member collapsed. On a world as dangerous as Earth, perhaps the ultimate survival trait wasn't individual hardiness, but collective sacrifice. As humanity integrated deeper into Commonwealth society, some archaeologists made a stunning discovery that rewrote galactic history. Ancient ruins on both Earth and Morskon contained identical artifacts, evidence of a common ancestral influence. We believed ourselves uniquely evolved to endure extreme conditions, Vexthal told Elena as they examined the findings. Now it appears we share a distant genetic heritage, seeded by the same precursor civilization. Further research revealed an astonishing truth. An ancient spacefaring species had conducted evolutionary experiments across hundreds of worlds, placing their genetic material in various environments to observe what would emerge. Earth and Morskon represented two approaches to the same experiment, one testing adaptation through biodiversity, the other through environmental consistency. The revelation challenged the Kraffar's identity as the galaxy's supreme survivors. If humans were their evolutionary cousins, what did that mean for their place in the cosmic order? The question transcended academic interest when dormant signals began activating across Commonwealth space, originating from precursor technology buried for millions of years. Something ancient was awakening, something that had created both humans and Krathar as evolutionary experiments, and it was returning to evaluate the results. The excavation site stretched across the ancient plateau, research domes clustered around the massive stone structure that had emerged from the earth. For centuries, humans had walked these grounds unaware of what lay beneath their feet. The Great Sphinx of Egypt, long considered merely a monument to a forgotten pharaoh, now revealed itself as something far more significant, a marker for the buried precursor installation. Commander Vexthal ducked his massive frame to enter the central research dome, where Dr. Race and her team had established their headquarters. Holographic displays flickered across the walls, showing comparative analyses of artifacts recovered from both Earth and Morskon. The similarity is undeniable, Dr. Montoya, the lead archaeologist, explained as she manipulated a three-dimensional model of a device recovered from beneath the Sphinx. The quantum signature in this control matrix matches exactly with artifacts from the Temple of Ascension on Morskon. Our sacred site, Vexthal murmured, mandibles clicking softly in contemplation. For millennia, we believed it was constructed by our ancestors as a monument to evolutionary triumph. As did we with our ancient wonders, Elena replied. It seems both our species built our civilizations around technology we didn't understand, attributing it to our own past achievements. The revelation had struck both species with existential force. DNA analysis had confirmed what the artifacts suggested. Both humans and Krathar carried genetic markers of deliberate engineering, signatures of the same creator species. The timeline suggests the precursors visited at least 800 worlds, Dr. O.C. noted, scrolling through data on his tablet. Based on radiation dating and stratigraphic analysis, these seeding experiments began approximately 3 million years ago. And then they vanished, Vexthal added. Just as the ancestral records on Morskon described, the star gods departed, leaving only their temples behind. Alina studied the central artifact, a crystalline matrix containing what appeared to be a dormant quantum transmitter. Similar devices have been discovered on 17 Commonwealth worlds in the months since the first finding, each one beginning to show signs of activation. The question remains, she said quietly, why would an advanced civilization see evolutionary experiments across the galaxy, then disappear for millions of years? And why are their devices awakening now? The answer came unexpectedly. As researchers worked to decipher the precursor language embedded in the artifacts, the quantum transmitters simultaneously activated across all discovered sites. A signal pattern emerged, coordinates pointing to a location beyond Commonwealth space, accompanied by a message in a language that took weeks to decode. Vexthal and Elena stood together in the Commonwealth Council chamber as Dr. Montoya presented their findings. The assembled delegates fell silent as the translation appeared on the central display. Children of our making, the great trial approaches. Return to the crucible with what you have become. They're summoning us, Elena realized. Both humans and Krothar, and perhaps others we haven't yet identified. Vextal's compound eyes fixed on the star map indicating the signal's origin point. The question is whether they're calling us as creators or as evaluators. As if in answer, long-dormant precursor installations throughout Commonwealth space began powering up, ancient machinery awakening after eons of silence. The game board was being prepared. The players summoned. Whatever the precursors had initiated millions of years ago was reaching its culmination. The precursors returned not as conquerors but as refugees, fleeing an entity they called simply the Void, a wave of entropic energy consuming the galaxy's outer reaches, breaking down matter at the quantum level. Their ancient plan was revealed. They had seeded evolutionary crucibles throughout the galaxy, hoping their experiments would produce species capable of stopping what they could not. The final confrontation would require abilities beyond conventional understanding. It demanded the integration of Krothar biological resilience with human adaptive innovation, precisely the qualities the precursors had spent millions of years cultivating. In an unprecedented collaboration, Vexthal and Elena led a joint mission to the periphery of the Void's advance. There, on a specially constructed platform combining Krothar biological technology with human quantum engineering, they attempted to stabilize the encroaching wave of entropic dissolution. The process required both species to transcend their evolutionary limitations. Krothar warriors underwent human genetic therapy to enhance their cognitive flexibility, while human scientists incorporated elements of Krothar biology to withstand extreme quantum conditions. As the stabilization sequence initiated, reality itself seemed to bend around them. The Void pushed against their efforts, seeking weakness in their defenses. The joint Commonwealth vessel synthesis hung in space at the edge of known reality. Through the observation portal, Vexthal and Elena watched as the Void advanced, not merely darkness, but an absence that consumed light, matter, and the fundamental laws of physics themselves. The precursors called it the Great Unmaker, said the precursor emissary, a being composed of crystalline energy that had once been organic, millions of years ago. We fled across galaxies to escape it, seeding worlds with our essence in hopes that evolution would produce what we could not, beings capable of resistance. You created us as weapons, Vexthal observed, his voice neither accusatory nor surprised. The emissary's form pulsed with affirmation. We created potential. The Krothar for resilience against extremes. Humans for adaptability and innovation. Other experiments for different qualities. We did not know which approach would succeed, only that our own had failed. Elena studied the quantum barrier generator, the culmination of a desperate collaboration between human theoretical physicists and Krothar biological engineers. It incorporated living tissue and inorganic components in ways neither civilization would have conceived alone. The barrier will hold for 8 minutes once activated, she reported. After that, the system will collapse under quantum strain. Enough time to deliver the catalyst, Vexthal confirmed, checking the specialized armor that now encased his massive frame. A hybrid technology incorporating human neural interfaces and Krothar biological reinforcement. The plan was simultaneously simple and impossible. They would enter the Void itself, delivering a quantum catalyst designed to reestablish normal physics within the anomaly. The unlikelihood of survival approached mathematical certainty. Your species were selected for different reasons, the precursor noted, observing their preparations. The Krothar for their ability to endure what should destroy them. Humans for their willingness to attempt what cannot be done. As final preparations completed, Vexthal turned to Elena. For generations, my people believed we alone had mastered survival. We built our identity around being the galaxy's supreme Deathworlders. Elena nodded, securing her helmet. And we humans never considered ourselves Deathworlders at all. We simply thought our planet was normal. Perhaps that is your species' greatest strength, Vexthal observed. You normalize the impossible until it becomes merely difficult. The station's alert sounded as the void accelerated its approach. The moment had arrived. I once asked what kind of world produces beings like humans. Vexthal said as they entered the deployment chamber. Now I understand. A world that offers no guarantees except the freedom to overcome. Elena smiled, and the Krothar emerged from a world that demanded perfection and accepted nothing less. Between us, perhaps we have what the precursors lacked, both the strength to endure and the imagination to transform. As the barrier activated and their vessel pierced the boundary between reality and unmaking, Vexthal experienced a sensation unknown in Krothar history, hope born not from certainty of victory,